Hello, Molly here on the Say It Skillfully Podcast, hosting leaders, entrepreneurs, elite athletes, artists, and professionals like you who open up about defining moments, what's been hard, and learnings and finding their true north and succeeding on their terms. I can't think of a better way to kick off our 2025 season than with a love story. And this one is literally a story of puppy love. 10 years ago, my guest founded an organization that to date has saved the lives of more than 8,700 dogs through arranging foster care, advocacy, and amazing community outreach. It's a matchmaking effort to find the right foster homes and then the right permanent homes for dogs to be adopted. And it's brought great joy to humans and four-legged furry ones alike. My guest has spoken at national animal welfare conferences and been featured on the Today Show. Though, as we'll soon hear, she took a pretty roundabout way to now her dream job. And I am thrilled to welcome the founding executive director of New York City's Muddy Paws Rescue, Rachel Ziering. Rachel, welcome to Say It Skillfully.
Thank you so much for having me, Mama.
Well, I am thrilled that you're here. And I have to say, we did grow up with a dog, Rusty the German Shepherd. Although when I lived in New York, I never considered having a dog because it's a pretty big deal. So I only found out about you through my darling niece, dog-loving niece, Henley Hall, who really, it changed her life to be fostering dogs. I saw that in her. So big shout out to Henley, obviously, and to all the compassionate dog lovers out there who have volunteered to make a really big difference.
Yeah.
So did you always have dogs as growing up?
So we had pets when I was young. We started with hamsters, goldfish, that kind of a thing. I was the oldest of three daughters, and I was the one who was really pushing for a dog. My mom had dogs growing up. My dad was not part of a pet family at all. Yeah. So when I think I was probably 9, we got our first dog finally. And we adopted him from the shelter. It was the Animal Rescue League in Boston. And we named him Luke. My sister was on a big Star Wars kick at the time. So Luke Skywalker. He was a 35-pound kind of a border collie mix, which right now with what I know, I would, advise. I think we didn't really know what we were getting into in terms of energy level with a border collie mix. So there were some challenges, and, obviously I said I would walk the dog, and then I didn't always walk the dog, but he was my first dog. So
that's so sweet. I remember my sister, because she was gunning for a dog, and she was very strategic. She would open the dog book, okay, and then she would kind of fake fall asleep on the dog book. I'm serious. I remember doing this because she was totally angling for the pets, and she had not great skin, so she kind of had a lot of allergies and all. Okay. I was the oldest of 3 girls too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm curious what their family dynamic was like.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of the mean older sister at the time. I wanted nothing to do with them. And now we're good friends, all of us. But it was definitely, it was a 2-year gap and then about a 2.5-year gap. So pretty carefully planned there. But
yeah. That was similar to us. Where did you grow up, Rachel?
I grew up just outside of Boston. Okay.
So say about your parents' early influences, like what was it like growing up as a kid?
So I mean, one big thing about me that everybody in my life knows is that I have a terrible memory. So I could barely tell you what I had for breakfast this morning. But growing up, we had a very musical family. My parents met doing musical theater. So my mom was a singer and a performer, and my dad played piano. And my mom was auditioning for a show at a community theater. And my dad was playing piano. And my mom actually didn't get into that show. But she couldn't make the callbacks because her grandfather passed away, I believe. But they met, and then they, just fell in love. So really musical theater is kind of what brought them together in the first place. And then that was a big part of our lives growing up. So we saw a lot of shows. We watched a lot of Disney movies. And I think my first show that we went to live was Peter Pan at the Wheelock Family Theater, I think in Boston. And we got kicked out because I wouldn't stop singing along out loud. So I don't remember this, but this is what I've been told. So yeah, then we got asked to leave because I didn't understand that it wasn't the same thing as watching it, on the TV screen at home. But yeah, so that's, I mean, we had a very, very musical family. I started playing piano when I was 7, I think. And then my sisters also played various instruments, and we all sang choir, growing up. And yeah, it was fun.
That's awesome. So did you, it's funny because when I first met you, it didn't, because I am like, I can perform, like we were gymnasts and I play the violin, right? So I can do it, but it's a performing thing for me. Because I do consider myself more introverted. So
Yeah.
so if you're singing out loud in a room full of people, that seems like a pretty like unafraid state.
Well, choir I think is a little different than like solo singing. I was never really like the get on stage and perform. I did do musical. I was in like my middle school shows and my high school shows, but I pretty quickly took more of like a backstage role, and music direction was really what I ended up wanting to do. I music directed my first musical in my senior year of high school was Little Shop of Horrors. So I, backstage or in the pit, if there was a pit, that was more my thing.
Wow, that's very impressive. So I played in the pit in many musicals in high school. So what drew you to take on that, to try that rollout?
My high school had a really good theater program. It was something like 11 shows a year at the time.
Jeez.
Only 2 musicals. One was kind of like the main stage musical, and then the other, they had the black box theater. And so we called it I don't remember what we called it, but I think it was Little Theater. But that was, they would do student run musicals and student run plays kind of year round. So I played piano already, and I had already sort of taken on like a section leader role for the choirs that I was in. And, if we broke up into sopranos and altos, I would review the alto part because I could play the piano. And I knew my dad had done a lot of it. And we, I don't know, it kind of just made sense at the time for me to take that on my senior year. And then we had a summer theater program at the high school that I ended up sort of taking over with another person, and ended up just doing a lot of musicals and music direction, and really enjoying it, conducting more so than playing. Practicing piano was never my favorite thing to do. So I actually, my family, so we had it was an upright piano that I would practice on, and it was a Yamaha, and it was a Yamaha Disclavier, which at the time was like very exciting and new. It was a floppy disk. It had a floppy disk thing that you could put in, and you could have it like be a player piano. So you could put the disc in, and it could have like pre-recorded stuff on it, and then the keys would move and the stuff would happen. But you could also record on the floppy disk. So I one time, again, I don't remember this, but I've heard the story a lot. I was practicing piano, and my parents from the other room just heard me keep making the same mistake over and over and over, a very specific mistake. And it turned out that I was not practicing piano. I had played it once and was sitting there reading a book while I was playing back on the player piano. So that got figured out pretty quick. I thought I was smarter than I was. But
that's like sight reading our lessons. We used to like once in a while we would like sight read. And then the benefit of that was that you actually became a very good sight reader because you were literally like sight reading your lessons for the teacher.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, sight reading honestly was also not my forte. My dad is somebody who can sit down and hear something once and sit down and play it. And I am not that. I like having the music in front of me. I like having time to review it. But for me, it was more about, as I got older and started doing more shows, it was about kind of the full orchestra, and putting that together with all the vocals and what was happening on stage and how the music contributed to the story and all of that. So,
wow. Did your parents feel? Did they feel like we want you to go into a musical career? I'm curious how the family dynamic was on that.
They were happy with that, but it wasn't something that, I mean, piano lessons was something that I would say was pushed on me and should have been pushed on me at the time. But I'm grateful for that now. They would have been happy, I think, no matter what we had done, really. But music was something that we grew up with, musicals in particular. So we were the family that would go on long car rides to visit family and listen to Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat or Evita or that kind of a thing.
It's a good indoctrination. So college, would talk about your decision making. Were you like, I'm going to get out of here? Or,
yeah. So I was, I think growing up, I was always like the youngest person in my class. I just where my birthday fell, which is in December, and something about the cutoff and starting in kindergarten, I was either going to be older or younger than everybody in my grade. And my parents sent me to school sooner, so I was just always the youngest in my class. And I think it would have killed me to admit it then, but I think that I was probably a little, emotionally not ready for college at the time, but it's what everyone was doing. So I applied to a bunch of various places. I considered music. I wanted to kind of keep options open. So I got into a couple of schools and I had some options. I was actually going to go to Vassar, and then I got off of the wait list at Amherst College in Western Mass. And at the time it was Amherst and Williams were like the top liberal arts schools. And I felt like I had to. And so I went to Amherst, and I did that for a year and a half. And I was miserable. College is not my cup of tea. Just like the college, like the campus life, really. And sharing bathrooms and bunking with people. And I didn't like camp either growing up. So it was just never really my thing. And I felt like that campus in particular, there were a lot of people saying a lot of words that didn't really actually mean a lot of things. So one day during my third semester, I think I was at home and for a weekend or I think holiday or something. And my mom said, you could transfer. And I was like, huh, okay. Like I hadn't even, I don't know, it hadn't occurred to me. But so I started looking into that. And as my mom puts it, like the next day I had like 10 options and a chart and but, and again, I don't remember this. This is not that long ago, but it was something I should remember. But I think I was not at a good point in my life and I probably purposefully blocked it out. But, so then I decided to go to, Berklee College of Music, in Boston, and mainly for their music education program. Because there really wasn't much in the way of, musical theater, like specific college degrees for musical theater. There was performance, there was, I could do piano performance, I could do, production, I could do technology, I could do, but there really wasn't anything that was like music direction. And I had done a lot with all of the shows I had done had been with high schools. And so I went into the music education. Berklee had a 5-year program, where you actually could get your state teaching license as an undergrad. So I didn't have to then do another master's program or anything like that, at least for the first 5 years of teaching. So I did that program, and I did my student teaching. And then I got a job at an elementary school out of college. And that was very different. I liked, I had babysat a lot growing up, but I think teaching music to K through 3 was what I was doing. It was rewarding in some ways, but it was not what I what I wanted to be doing. It was just kind of what I found myself doing with the degree that I had.
Yeah, that would be sainthood, teaching that level. No, I'm seriously, having been in there and knowing what music, quote unquote, music sounds like, that's brutal.
It was a
Okay.
lot of ta ta ti ti ta. Like it just, and I did that for 3 years, and I knew by the end of the second year that I couldn't do it for 30 years, and had I been able to get a job at a high school, maybe I would have felt differently. But I also think I graduated, I was 22, and I, that's barely older than a high school senior, So, I think, at the time I felt, much more up there, but, the jobs were just not as plentiful in high schools because there are fewer high schools. So I ended up in elementary school, and teaching recorder to 30, a group of 30, 7 or 8 year olds. I couldn't keep doing it. So, but yeah, I was doing musicals sort of on the side as, a way to make a little extra money. And then also just because I enjoyed it. So I would teach during the day, and then I would go over to, it was mostly at the high school that I went to, that I was still working at over the summers. And then also, for their spring musicals, I would music direct or, play piano or something.
And so how did you get yourself out of the not dream job?
So I decided, in very Rachel style, I think, that if I was going to do something, I wanted to do it fully. So I ended up leaving my teaching job and moving to New York, because my sister lived in New York. So I actually ended up kind of rooming with her and one of her other roommates or friends for a while, while I kind of got set up. And I moved without a job, without, I didn't really have, I just knew that I could figure it out. And I worked at a restaurant for a little while. I did some nannying. I walked people's dogs. I did kind of like odd jobs to kind of pay the rent. And I started doing musicals, like at universities, or community theaters, or, again, at high schools, middle schools. So, but my goal was to music direct on Broadway. So I figured it wasn't going to happen if I wasn't here in New York. So, so that's what I did.
That's a very lofty goal. Music direct on Broadway. Mom, I quit my job. I'm going to New York. Don't worry. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, that's exactly how my mom would have put it. Yeah. I was the kid that, when she always says that she never even knew what schools I was applying to. And I would just say for college, and I would say, look, here's my list. Here's the checks that I need for the application fee. Thank you very much. And then I'll let you know when I hear back. It was very self-sufficient, after a certain point.
Nice. Well, so how did you find getting yourself to music direct on Broadway? So talk about that, because that's sort of not the easiest thing to break into.
Yeah, it was tricky. I mean, and I never did end up music directing on Broadway, but I ended up working on a couple of shows. And like I said, I'm not the best piano player out there. There, especially when you're here and you're doing, everybody is amazing. So it's not like you're even competing by talent. It's, you have to know people, you have to have the connections. So somebody gave me the advice, I don't remember who it was even, but to literally just go around to the stage doors and drop off a letter at the door for whoever the music director was of that show, and say, hey, I just moved here, I'm interested in this, could I sit in on a show? So I sat in on a lot of pits. I did that, and which was interesting to, just to get to meet people, and like see how it all works, because it's always different depending on the show. If there's a pit, if they're in a room in a building across the street, and made some connections there, just sort of acquaintances. And then I got called for there was a show called First Date. It only ran about 6 months, but their music director had been music directing at Wicked previously, and he had left Wicked and he was going to be doing this. So I had sat in at Wicked, and this is where I met this person, and he called. Well, I think he texted or something, but he called to see if I wanted to be like sort of the second music assistant on this new show he was doing. And it was very unofficial. It was kind of, I don't think I was on their payroll. I think it was kind of like he personally wanted to have more assistance with what he was doing, so he paid me a little bit, and so I did that. And music copying is kind of the so like at the time it was Finale, I think, was the software of choice, and kind of just making sure that the score stays up to date as all the changes are made. And so I got really good at I had my little MIDI keyboard and my little number keyboard over here, and it was inputting all of that stuff and making sure it's spaced correctly and visually easy to read. So I did that, and then I actually worked on a very early workshop of Hamilton, which is kind of everyone seems most impressed by that, but I really did very little. I mostly got the music director his water that week, but it was fun. Lin-Manuel Miranda was already big, and we knew it was going to be a big thing. But then I started subbing on one of the keyboard books at Wicked, and that was another, that was probably the biggest thing I actually did. There are 3 keyboard books. So it was keyboard 3. It was, looking back, it should have been very simple and easy, but I was a wreck about it. I was so nervous. And I was kind of like last call for their sub list. But I would go in every couple of weeks probably and play a show here and there. So that was fun, but and that's probably, I think it was I want to say it was 2013 or 14 when I made my Broadway debut. So I don't know. I just but I had a lot of free time as a musician because there's always looking for work, and that's when I started volunteering and fostering with dogs. So that's kind of.
So before we get to the dogs, how did you keep up your just motivation, not get defeatist or start having negative self-talk? Because it just does strike me that takes a lot of internal drive to keep with it.
Yeah, I would say I wasn't able to do any of that successfully. I definitely was very hard. I was ending up having to do things that like nannying or like working at a restaurant, or just to be able to kind of make ends meet. And New York is kind of notoriously difficult to piecemeal things like that together and get around. And I think I have once I've said that I'm going to do something, I just kind of innately am not going to stop until it's done. So I did whatever I kind of had to do to make it work. But no, it was definitely, trying to break into that world where everybody was better at what I was doing than me. And it's kind of like any industry, I think, there's, it's political, and, you have to know people, and there's kind of a boys club situation, which is funny because you wouldn't really think that in theater, but on the music side, in the pit, I do think that there's a little bit of that going on. So yeah, it was hard. But I did, the best job I could do at whatever I was offered. And I think I could have probably continued on and I didn't leave because I felt like I couldn't do it. It felt like I didn't want to anymore. So
nice. So then how did the whole dog thing turn into this whole other?
Yeah. So I started volunteering and fostering, and at the time I had a Shih Tzu. When I had gotten my first dog, as soon as I got a job out of college, I got a dog. And I was that person who didn't know where I was going to be living and didn't know landlords and all of the things. So I got a little dog. First mistake. um, no, but now I'm a big dog person. And that always happened. But I got a Shih Tzu. She was 3 at the time. I got her from somebody who couldn't keep her anymore. And her name was Bailey. And she passed away 2 years ago. She was 16, but she was not good with other dogs. So fostering was tough. And even with a small dog, being there with a dog who just wants to eat the other dog in the room, it's hard. So I had Bailey, and I started fostering, and then I sort of started slipping into volunteering with the group that I was with, because they would hold adoption events, and I would bring the foster that I had and just kind of hang around. And I have a really good and bad habit, I guess, of if I see something, it's kind of in New York, if you see something, say something, right? But if I see something that I think could be improved on, I have a hard time not saying it. So I ended up kind of just taking over a lot of the part, like the operations of that rescue. And it was unpaid, it was not, I was volunteering. But there was one matinee that I was playing for Wicked, and it was on a Saturday. And I just remember sitting there thinking that I was missing the adoption event, because that's when the adoption events were held. And I just would have rather been there. So, and I'm like, I'm sitting here in a Broadway pit making money playing on Broadway, and I don't want to be here. I'd rather be there. So that was kind of, if there was a moment, that was probably the moment that I was like, well, I could probably figure out how to make that a full-time job. So that's what I did.
That's what I did. Blah, blah, blah. So how did you get that? When you say so I love the self-direction, like this internal conversation with Rachel and Rachel, which is like, hey, I can do this, but I'd rather be here. And so many people, I think, Rachel, think that, but they don't actually move on it. Mm-hmm. Right. And I can tell that you're a woman of action. So, but for the people listening, because I think a lot of people, so what exactly did you do really to then?
I worked really, really, really hard. I think we're almost 9 years in now, mm-hmm. and it's definitely easier than it was, but it's harder in a lot of other ways. When I started Muddy Paws, I was at that point, I was getting a sort of very small salary from the other rescue. And I just still saw a lot of ways that things could be improved. So then I kind of hit a ceiling with that rescue, and I couldn't really go any further with it. And I was sort of being I won't say shut out, but kind of, there was a limit on what they were permitting me to do. So I guess I don't like limits. So, I started looking into, just all the logistics, founding a nonprofit and what you have to do to be a nonprofit. And I definitely, there was a lot more to it that I didn't realize until, maybe 2 years later, when I got a letter from Department of whatever it was telling me that I didn't have this requirement that I thought and I was like, well, how was I supposed to know? I never, there's no course on how to do this. And ended up being like sometimes there was like a small financial fine for something, and then I knew, and then we didn't do it again going forward. But things like workers' comp, which should be obvious, but I had never worked in like an office setting or like a standard, I worked at a school and I'd worked at freelancing, right, for music. So I didn't realize that at a certain point, when you have a certain number of employees or your payroll is a certain amount, you have to have workers' comp, and it's just a legal requirement. So we ended up having to back pay that. So I definitely made a lot of mistakes along the way. Luckily, nothing that really kind of shut us down or anything. But yeah, a lot of it was just trial and error. And for a long time, it was me and a couple of other really wonderful volunteers who went all in with me to get this running. So, and I took a lot of what I had learned at the other rescue, which was actually a lot of learning what I didn't want to do. And I improved on it from there. And just kind of kept pushing through. And I mean, there were definitely times in the first couple of years, especially, that there's still times that, where I say, oh, this is too hard. I want to just do something else. Right. But I think, especially after I got through the first 3 years or so, I was able to kind of sort of see how this could continue on without me if it needed to, and kind of building something that doesn't rely on me for everything. Right. It's, I think we're still a small staff, but I definitely still do more than one job, but I do, many less jobs than I did at that time. I was doing everything. I was adoptions. I was volunteer manager. I was arranging all the adoption events. I was handling all the medical records. I was doing, just everything. So, yeah, and I mean, it just kind of piecemeal added people as we went, and within a couple of years, I would say it was 2018, maybe, we had 5 staff members, I think. And it was still pretty like sort of unofficial at the time. Like we didn't have a, well, we had a payroll processor, but we didn't have benefits. We didn't, have days off. Like there was no schedule. It was like everybody works. If you need to be off for something, then that's fine. But like it's all the time. Like the default was you were on, right? Yeah. So, and we still have, we need to have an emergency line for our fosters when they have medical emergencies with their dogs. So, but now we have a rotation of people who can do things like that.
So who did you have mentors? I mean, it really sounds like you just dug in and like figured it out on your own.
That is kind of what I did. Yeah. I mean, I definitely learned from what I saw at the other rescue. I would not say that I was mentored. I didn't, I went into it not really knowing that there was a whole animal welfare world out there of shelters and rescues. And I learned in 2017 that there were animal welfare conferences, like national conferences every year. And I didn't know that. So I started, the conferences have been big for kind of just connecting with other groups and learning what they're doing. And, but no, I definitely was sort of tunnel vision, which I don't know if that's kind of how most people do it, but it was what I did.
So when you think about your musical background and the stage work, so anything come to mind about what you learned or how you apply those kinds of skills to your startup and your operation now?
I mean, I think, I don't know if it was specific to music, but, being a freelancer, you're very much in charge of your own everything, right? You don't have a manager, laying out a schedule for you, and you don't have, you have to kind of piece together jobs and make sure they're all going to work together and schedule, but also just time to practice for this and time to, so I think having been a freelancer, whether that was music or not, probably just taught me a lot about time management and kind of being on top of my own stuff. Because in the end, there was nobody to pick it up if I dropped the ball on something. So, and I've dropped a lot of balls. It's, I've never definitely made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot. But I think probably from the music or the freelance life, like that's what I would say I took away.
I appreciate that. And I'm hearing like some of these mistakes and, especially when you're managing volunteers, it's one thing to manage people that you could pay, but I am curious for folks, the listeners out there, what have you learned that has worked well for you with managing volunteer folks?
Yeah. I mean, I think volunteers, whether it's volunteers or paid staff, they're everyone is there for a reason, and everyone is there to it might be to find fulfillment for themselves. It might be because they're looking to adopt and they want to kind of like, you know, spend some time with various dogs. But uh showing appreciation for that, whether it's, you know, official, where, you know, you're shouting them out on Instagram or you're sending them a card, or but just at the end of every day saying thank you so much, like that. It's, I think that's a big part of how we developed into such a sort of community focused organization, is just you have to build that community. So, and it's definitely been a journey for me, learning how to let go of certain things, right? I can no longer look at every medical record. I can no longer process every adoption application or every adoption. It's so it's, you know, that's always kind of, they talk about, you know, founders syndrome. And once I learned that was a thing, I was determined not to do it. So I learning to like let go of all of those things, but then you need someone to do them. You know, you need we need volunteers, and we need staff, and we need, I'm a big proponent of paying people what they deserve if they're working for you, if it's a full-time job. I think there's a whole kind of feeling about nonprofit industry, right? We're not here to make money, but we're also not here to live below the poverty line because we're a nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
So, and to get the work done, you know, we can have all the technology in the world, but we still need the people to do the things, right?
Yeah.
So, I think people deserve to, you know, be paid for the job that they're doing.
Yeah.
So we do have a full-time staff now.
Very wise, very wise. What, Rachel, is the hardest thing for you about what you do?
There are so many hard things. You know, day to day, it's like right now I have 15 sticky notes scattered across my desk that you can't see, of things that I've jotted down during all of the calls that I've been having. And the to-do list just piles up and up and up and up. And I feel like I still don't really have a whole lot of time to kind of get it back down to inbox zero, right? So, but I think the toughest, I mean, I don't know if I could pick one, honestly. It all kind of, I still feel sort of a sense of personal responsibility for it all, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but it does sometimes come back to, it all comes back to me in the end, right? So, you know, I could have a staff member, but they could always leave and find another job. I could have, you know, volunteers have come and gone, and that I've kind of gotten used to. But I feel like, you know, if in the end this is still my responsibility, like the buck stops here. So having that responsibility is just a lot sometimes. But I have a really, really great group of staff now who handle all different areas, and it's gotten so much more manageable over the years. I think the dogs, sometimes there are difficulties with the dogs. I end up kind of fostering. So I have 4 dogs personally. And I know, hazard of the job. They're currently, well, 3 of them are currently sleeping over here, but the fosters that I get tend to be sort of the more challenging ones. You know, this dog is having behavior difficulties. This dog is, you know, in New York in particular, separation anxiety is a big thing. Like this dog is barking nonstop when people are out, and then the neighbors complain, and then the landlord, you know. So I end up with a lot of the more challenging dogs. And that's, you know, personally pretty challenging because I'm working them into my household of 4, and still doing my job, right? So yeah, there's a lot of hard part. I could keep going, but
well, you're a saint. You're a saint. So you're obviously still doing it, Rachel. What What moves you about it? Why do you keep doing it?
Well, in some ways, I think I'm just really, really stubborn. um, and I don't like giving up. But I also think that I I think we're getting closer and closer to a point where it could run without me, and it could, continue on. It's kind of like the hit by a bus scenario, right? Like if you were hit by a bus tomorrow, right, would everything be okay? Um and until recently, or a couple of years ago, or well, COVID kind of threw everything off, but um the answer would have been no. And I think, at this point we're getting better about documentation and, having official procedures and policies, and it's not just all in my head. So um kind of building having built something that, well, hopefully having built something that would outlast me, and to have a lasting effect like that, I think I'm determined to at least see it through there. And the other jobs that I had worked, or careers that I had had in teaching and in music, both I did for about 3 years. And by the end of the second year, closer to the third year, I kind of had this like, I can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And when we hit 3 years with Muddy Paws, I was kind of worried that I was going to have the same, that I wasn't going to be able to kind of stay committed to it. It was like, well, every 3 years, I'm just going to find a new job. But I was still satisfied with what I was doing. And I think I've always had this connection with the dogs. Obviously, that's why I got into it. And I just, I look at my dogs and I think, where would they be without? And then there's, 8,000 dogs out there now that are Muddy Paws dogs. And it's not just the dogs, it's the people, it's the volunteers. Sometimes we'll be having our, foster volunteer holiday party, or we just debuted our new truck, and I look around and there are people who have, developed, like met at Muddy Paws and got married, right? Volunteers, or people have made some of their best friends volunteering with us, or and I see these things happening, and it's kind of crazy that it all comes out of this one organization, but it's a lot of good. So
That's fantastic. So let's do a little promo. We in New York City. Everyone, wake up here. Talk about, what makes for an ideal foster. Help people understand a little bit about how it works, and
sure.
if they know someone who could do it. I will tell you from experience. I have a friend and my niece who it really made their life better.
Yeah, yeah. So fosters are always, we always need fosters. No matter what, the answer is always yes. And because we are foster based, so we don't have a location, we don't have a shelter. And at our in our care at any given time, we'll have 60 to 110 dogs. So they're all in foster homes. And we have really tried to build up a sort of a good experience for the fosters. So we have all the support. We provide all the supplies that they might need. We're always grateful when people can buy their own food or toys, etc. But it is something that we have if they need. And then if you're fostering with us, you have a login to a foster portal, so you can log on and see what the current foster needs are. So you can request a match, is what we call it. You can kind of send in, say, I can cover those dates for somebody, or I can take this dog that you want to pull from the shelter. And then we also will send out sort of matches to people based on their preferences, so people can tell us, my building only allows dogs up to 40 pounds, or I prefer to have, a dog who's 100 pounds, which we love. That's my favorite. But and then availability. So fosters can give us their availability and tell us, I'm going to be in town these 3 weeks. And then we'll kind of figure out how to put all of that puzzle together for, with the dogs and the people that we have. So it's a quick registration process. And we're just looking for anybody who wants to help, really. I mean, people all the time we hear, oh, I couldn't foster, I work. Everyone works, so it's, or I live in an apartment. Okay, so does 90% of our fosters. And we would love to have more fosters with, backyards and fenced in yards and just, all of the suburban stuff. But that's just not the reality in New York. So anybody can foster. If you're out 8 hours a day, we'll give you a senior who doesn't need to be walked for 8 hours. We'll figure out what works. What works for you.
That is absolutely amazing. How about fundraising? Do you have to raise money? Is that part of your job? How do you do that part?
Yeah. So it's funny because for the first couple of years, I didn't write a single grant. I didn't ask anyone. Well, I asked my parents. They gave me a very small amount of money to start everything up with, but we didn't, regularly ask for donations. I was very focused on adoptions. And that was how we brought in most of our revenue. But now we have a full-time development director. We have a marketing director, and then we have a donor relations and events manager. So it's kind of a 3-person group on that side of things. And then I'm also very involved in, all of that in terms of grant writing, fundraising. We have sort of our, we call them our signature initiatives, very fancy term, but for the things we do regularly every year. So we do our peer-to-peer fundraiser. We call it the Pack Challenge. That's kind of like a walk for hunger type thing, except there's no walk. But we get our community to set up their own pages and fundraise with their networks. We run different campaigns throughout the year. So we call it our Portrait for Good. And that's where people can donate and receive a custom portrait of their dog. We get a group of artists together, and we've raised a bunch of money that way. And then we have, we're kind of, we have some very generous donors who will offer matches for certain campaigns, and then grants from organizations as well, from animal welfare granting organizations. So
yeah, I love it. I love the grassroots. Rachel, what's the site people can go to learn more?
The website is muddypawsrescue.org.
muddypawsrescue.org. Everyone write that down, and you can make a huge difference in many ways for Rachel and her crew. This is so fabulous. I have to ask one question before we wrap.
Yeah.
I read, because you have all these people, and people can be kind of mean when they write comments or whatever, but you have very skillfully addressed some of the most really challenging comments from people. So I just have to ask, for our listeners' sake, where did you learn that ability to toe the line on that? Because you were very effective.
Are you talking about like online reviews and stuff like that?
Online reviews, comments. I haven't heard you speaking as much, but I'm telling you, I read a bunch of these things, and people are kind of inflamed, and they're not as skillful in giving their constructive input, let's just say, but you respond in this very high road way.
I think I will say that if you're looking earlier on, it's probably me responding. It more recently, it also could be one of my staff members. So it might not all be me, but I think people tend to, and this is every industry, but people tend to only write reviews if they've had a really good experience or a really bad experience, right? So I think I try to, address their concern. And also, I think usually most of this comes from miscommunications, right? So it's whatever they saw happening, or whatever was happening in their reality, was maybe not what we were trying to actually have happen in our reality. So kind of addressing where the breakdown in communication was, and figuring that out, and helping them, but also assuring people who are reading that we are aware of what's happening, we are working to fix it, but also just not being, we do make mistakes. So I think understanding that, admitting that, and also just sort of just working towards the positive. I don't know. It always sort of made me very happy early on when the first negative review we ever got, I think I had like a meltdown about it, because I was just, it was very personal, right? And how do you not let it get to you? And I still let it get to me sometimes, believe me, but being able to kind of stay calm and de-escalate, right? And I don't know where I learned it, honestly. My father was a manager at a company for a very long time. I went to him a lot for advice when I was starting off. But I don't know. I think I've learned that you don't get anywhere by fighting back. So just trying to continue moving forward.
That's great. That's great advice for everybody. Okay, a few quick things. Hobbies.
Does hanging out with my dogs count on the couch?
That totally counts.
I do that. I also I go to the gym a lot. I did kickboxing for a long time, and then now I've just been doing weightlifting. So
wow, because that's BA.
It's a good outlet.
Nice. That's a really awesome. Okay, would you say you're an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then even for the friends who might know you super well, Rachel, what's one thing they might not know about you and find surprising?
I don't know. Once you know me, I'm not that surprising. I don't know. That's a tough one. I love ice cream. I don't know. That's probably not what you're looking for, but
it's all good.
Fun fact about me.
It's all good. What do you have a particular flavor that you love?
Ben and Jerry's. Anything Ben and Jerry's.
Anything Ben and Jerry's. Okay, we love them. We love
milk
them.
And cookies is my kind of go-to.
Okay, good. We have to have that. So, assuming you are where you are, everything's going great. Do you have a do-over that you would share with listeners?
It's tough to think about because I feel like everything I've done has had there's been a result and has gotten me here. So I could say I wish I had been, less micromanaging at the start and like letting people help more. But I also don't know, that may have led us somewhere else, or I wouldn't have learned how to let go in a way like I have today. So I think just trusting my gut, I think, has always just been a thing that I'm not always the best at, because I do care very much what other people think, and what if I have a very strong idea about something and then somebody else says, well, that's absolutely wrong because blah blah blah, I'm like, oh, they're probably right, so really kind of being able to stick with my gut because it's usually correct. It's just learning to trust it.
Yeah, good, very wise words. Do you have there are many things that you've accomplished, but a proudest accomplishment or moment to date, whether it's work or personal?
I think, most recently we debuted our adoption truck, which is, it was a big ordeal in terms of fundraising and just logistics. And it was over a year in production. And but we did finally debut it, and it's a 40 or a 34-foot adoption truck that people can come and walk through at our adoption events. And it really represents us, I think, in a way that that our previous kind of hand-me-down truck didn't. And we did a whole big ribbon cutting, and it's kind of crazy, but sometimes I get hit with, like I said earlier, about seeing the groups of people and how this wouldn't, these relationships might not exist, or these dogs wouldn't have found their homes, or I get those kind of whoa moments, here and there. But that was one.
It's big for sure. Okay, you're not doing this. Is there a profession in your next life that you would be in?
Technology. I am, and one of my many jobs that I take upon myself, and probably shouldn't, but is I do most of our MarTech support, basically. So we've moved into a Salesforce database. I've kind of taught myself how to build Salesforce environments, and I think it's a puzzle to be solved, and awesome. I love it.
That's awesome. Okay, nicknames that you can share with us?
I really don't have any nicknames. My sisters call me Rach, but that's not really very interesting. Oh, you know what? My staff calls me dad. And it's funny because one of our other staff, they call mom. So I think it's because I'm more of the, just get it done. Or, again, like the tech support, they call me when they need help figuring out something, or, this is broken. What do I do? So I get called dad sometimes. That's fine by me.
That's awesome. And then lastly, do you have a favorite food or cuisine?
Ice cream. Does that count?
That totally counts. That is a winning answer. Okay. You shared a lot. I want to just offer I'm very proud of you, because when we chatted, you're like, I'm not someone who talks about myself. And for all the folks out there who don't talk about themselves, I just want folks to realize that there's lots to learn. And being generous of yourself and your experience really helps others. So thank you for doing that. What if you kind of take a step back and listening to yourself, do you have a top takeaway from all that you shared?
I mean, about myself, or
it could be anything that's top of mind.
That feels like a lot of pressure. I guess just, I did a lot of different things growing up, and I had a lot of different careers, and I never really felt like that was like something was the right thing for me until now. And I think if you're not happy in what you're doing, just like I was unhappy at college and didn't think about doing anything about it until my mom suggested transferring, right? I think there's always options, and people who are willing to help, and music directors at stage doors who are willing to let random people who drop off letters come sit in, right? So putting yourself out there and being willing to try, and not being not letting yourself remain unhappy if that's where you're at.
Nice. What was it like for you to share all that you shared today with us?
It's funny. I'm so used to talking about Muddy Paws and kind of giving like the elevator pitches and the boilerplates, and but no, it's interesting to kind of get into the nitty gritty of my life, and like the things that I've forgotten at this point. Really do have a terrible memory, but no, it's looking at it kind of 2020, hindsight's 2020, right? Like a lot of it kind of makes sense now as I piece it together.
That's great. Listen, you are a force for good, my friend. Saving dogs' lives, improving the lives of their lucky foster and adopted families. You see it, you said it, and then you did it, right?
Yeah.
And your whole limitless energy, Rachel, is really inspiring. So I just appreciate you, how you are part of the solution, and you're helping all of us to be safe, seen, and heard, and our true and very best selves.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So not that you need it, but if I can be helpful in any way, you're not big on mentors. I'm
you can
here
foster.
to help. I can yeah. I'm in North Carolina now, but I can certainly encourage my New York friends to be fostering, which I will be doing. So I hope our paths will cross again, and I'm wishing you and Muddy Paws all the best.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
You take good care.
All right.
Oh my God, folks. As you have seen, she has found her authentic voice, and boy, she's made it life-saving and has benefited her career and her relationships and all that she does. And I want you to do the same. So I have launched the Say It Skillfully 101 training program to help you speak up and make your words matter. So check it out on sayitskillfully.com. Also, I am thrilled to be co-authoring a book with my idol and the one and only Marshall Goldsmith, due to release in a few months' time. So sign up for our mailing list, and we'll keep you posted on that. So I have to have one final thought, and it's from the 19th century American humorist with the pen name Josh Billings. You ready for this? A dog is the only thing on earth that loves you more than he loves himself. And I have to add my appreciation to the skillful Eric Patton, who makes this show possible and is the driving force for all things Say It Skillfully and our resources and programs. So that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us. Please be part of the solution and kindly share this show. Amplify Rachel's voice and her amazing dogs. Reflect on your own top takeaways, and no, I'm cheering for you to be who you are and say what needs to be said, so that you and those around you have the shared reality that makes life, work a lot better. Thanks, folks.